The candles were already burning when I entered the chapel that night. Every one of them, though I hadn't touched a match. Their flames leaned toward something invisible, and the air pulsed like a held breath. She stood there at the altar, Sister Miriam, dressed in white, humming that same broken prayer I'd heard in my dreams. Her eyes met mine, calm as confession, and for a moment I believed she had forgiven me. But then her voice changed, layered, echoing through the stone. "Who are you praying to, Elias?" The Bible in my hands was blank. Every word I'd ever believed in had bled into silence. I tried to speak, to command, to repent, but the only thing that answered was the sound of my own breathing, matching hers, perfectly synchronized, like two ghosts remembering the same sin. I thought I'd come to save her. I was wrong. The exorcism had never been hers. But to understand that, to know what truly waited inside those walls, we need to go back. Back to the letter. Back to the moment I swore I'd never return to St. Thaddeus Convent. I hadn't set foot inside a church for nearly 8 years before the letter arrived. I hadn't set foot inside a church for nearly 8 years before the letter arrived. The paper smelled of incense and mildew, and though the handwriting was unfamiliar, I recognized the seal of the archdiocese pressed into its corner, a red cross smudged by age. I read it 3 times before I understood what it was asking. Return to St. Thaddeus Convent. Attend to unfinished matters. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. The last time I saw St. Thaddeus, snow had been falling against the chapel windows, and Sister Miriam's body lay still on the floor. The others said she died in grace. I knew better. Her eyes were open when I closed them, and for a moment I thought she looked relieved, as if the thing inside her had finally found its way into me instead. I left the priesthood a week later. My faith had cracked in silence, not in anger. I tried to build a quiet life afterward, teaching Latin to boys who couldn't care less, renting a room above a bakery that smelled of yeast and sugar. But every night, around the same hour, I'd wake to the faint sound of a woman humming through the wall. The tune was the same one Miriam used to sing during evening prayers. I'd tell myself it was the pipes or my neighbor's radio. Still, I began to sleep with the light on. People think exorcism is about violence, about shouting, commands, fire, and Latin words. It isn't. It's about listening. If you listen long enough, you start to hear what's really being answered. That was the first thing they taught us in Rome. Demons imitate memory because memory is already a form of possession. I didn't believe it then. I do now. When the letter came, I placed it beside my bed and stared at it for hours. I told myself I wouldn't go. But dawn arrived like a verdict, pale and merciless, and I found myself packing the old stole, the Bible, and the wooden crucifix I swore never to touch again. The train ride north was long and colorless, the windows fogged with breath. Fields passed like forgotten prayers. I don't know what I expected to find there. Forgiveness, perhaps, or proof that I'd imagined it all. But as the convent spire appeared against the gray horizon, I felt something stir in the hollow place inside me. A faint whisper, almost gentle, "You never left, Elias." And in that moment, I realized it was right. The road to the convent had almost vanished beneath the moss. The sign that once read St. Thaddeus of Mercy hung crooked, its letters half-eaten by rust. When I reached the gate, I found it unlocked, swaying with the wind as though it had been waiting for me. The air carried that scent only old chapels have: candle smoke, stone dust, and the faint sweetness of forgotten flowers. I stepped through, and the silence folded around me like a heavy robe. The main hall was darker than I remembered. The stained glass was coated with grime, turning holy figures into ghosts of color. My footsteps echoed against the tiles, each one a trespass. A crucifix still hung above the altar. Though the wood had split down the center, Christ's body fractured along the grain. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, the kind that comes before tears or confession. I called her name once, softly, Miriam. It came out smaller than I intended, as if spoken by someone else. The wind replied through a broken window. I told myself that was all it was. Yet somewhere deeper in the building, something shifted, a faint scrape, like a chair being moved across stone. The convent's living quarters had long been sealed, but the door to her old cell was open. Inside, dust lay thick on everything except the bed, as though someone had sat there recently. On the wall above it, her rosary still hung from a nail. The silver cross was tarnished black. I reached for it, not to take it, only to feel its weight again. But before my hand could touch it, one of the beads snapped free and fell to the floor. The sound was soft, deliberate. I froze. The room was colder now. My breath fogged the air. The faint scent of lavender, her perfume, drifted through the dust. I whispered a prayer I no longer believed in and turned to leave, but the door closed before I could move. Not slammed, not forced. It simply shut, the way a hand might close gently over a wound. Behind me, the rosary began to sway. I stood there for what felt like minutes listening. Then I heard it, a breath, not mine. Slow, unsteady, as though someone was trying to match my rhythm. I spoke into the air. "Who's there?" The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was deeper than any quiet I'd ever known. When I opened the door again, the corridor outside was empty. Yet from the chapel below came the faintest sound, a voice humming. That same prayer, that same tone I had heard through the walls for years. I told myself it was memory playing tricks, but when I looked down at my hands, I saw the bead that had fallen resting in my palm. I don't remember picking it up. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I made a small fire in the old rectory's hearth and sat with my back to it, Bible open on my knees, though I wasn't reading. The flames made the walls tremble. Every time the wood cracked, I looked toward the door. Nothing moved, yet the sense of company was constant. Not threatening, only aware. I thought of Sister Miriam as she was before the exorcism. Her laughter in the courtyard, the way she'd hum while polishing the chalices. She used to say that silence was God's favorite language. I'd mocked her for it once. Then he must have a lot to say to me, I'd told her. That was the last time she ever smiled at me. Around midnight, the humming returned, clearer now, closer. It came not from the chapel below, but from within the walls, seeping through stone like water. I followed it, lantern in hand, down the narrow staircase that led to the crypt. Dust drifted in the beam of light. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened, heavy with damp earth and something else. Something faintly metallic, like old blood. At the bottom, the corridor opened into the chamber where she had died. The table where we had bound her was still there, the straps brittle with age. My lantern flickered, and for an instant I thought I saw her shape lying there, the outline of her habit, the pale curve of her face. But when I blinked, it was gone. Only the impression remained, pressed into the dust like a shadow too heavy to lift. I knelt beside it, whispering her name again. The light dimmed until only her rosary bead gleamed in my pocket. I took it out, intending to leave it there as an apology. But the moment it touched the ground, the whisper came. That same question, soft and patient. "Who are you praying to, Elias?" The sound didn't echo. It bloomed inside my skull, a thought spoken by someone else. I dropped the bead and staggered back. My lantern crashed to the floor, plunging the room into darkness. I heard movement, not footsteps, but the dry rustle of fabric. Then the air changed, colder, wetter, as if the stones themselves exhaled. Something brushed my sleeve. I turned, but there was only blackness and that smell of lavender, faint as breath on glass. My throat tightened. "You're not her," I said. The voice answered, almost kindly. "No, but you are." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, it waited, and in that waiting, I understood. This place didn't want to be cleansed. It wanted to be remembered. I ran from the crypt, half blind in the dark, until I reached the chapel again. The candles I'd left unlit were now burning, all of them, their flames bending in the same direction, as if drawn to something unseen. The hum filled the space, rising and falling like breathing. I dropped to my knees out of instinct or fear or both. My voice came out ragged when I tried to pray, the words tangled in the smoke. "Deliver us from evil," I whispered, but it sounded wrong, empty. The echo mocked me. "Deliver us." I lifted my eyes toward the altar, and there she was, not standing, not moving, just there, the way memory reappears before reason can resist it. Sister Miriam. Her habit was clean, impossibly white, her face serene. She was humming the same tune, but now I realized it wasn't melody. It was breath counted in prayer, mine from years ago when I'd performed the rite. I forced myself to speak. "Miriam, if this is you." She stopped humming. Her head turned slightly, and the light trembled as if flinching. "You came back," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered, soaked in something like pity. I nodded. "To finish what I started." Her smile cracked at the edges. "You never finished it, Elias. You began it in his name, but ended it in yours." The air pressed tighter around me. I wanted to deny it, to call her a lie or a trick, but her eyes held something worse than accusation. Recognition. "I tried to save you," I said. She stepped forward. The candles bent toward her, flames stretching like hands. "You tried to prove you could." Her words struck deeper than any curse. I remembered every moment of that night. How I'd shouted, how I'd commanded, how I'd demanded obedience not from the demon, but from faith itself. I had wanted to be right more than I had wanted her to live. The voice that had whispered before returned, layered now, echoing from her lips and mine. "Who are you praying to, Elias?" The chapel darkened until only the crucifix glowed faintly above us. The split wood looked like an open wound. I reached for my Bible, but when I opened it, the pages were blank. Every word gone, the ink bled into silence. Her form flickered, dimmed, then solidified again, standing beside me now. "There was never a demon, Father," she said. "Only belief rotting into pride. You gave it my name because you were too afraid to give it your own." I felt something collapse inside me. Not fear, but recognition. My knees gave way. Tears came, dry and useless. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The candles began to go out one by one. She placed a cold hand over my heart. "Then let it leave you." The last flame died, and for a heartbeat I felt something depart. Not from the room, but from within me. The silence that followed was absolute, and for the first time in years, it didn't frighten me. It just was. It has been 15 years since that night. I live now in a small village by the coast, where the wind never stops moving and the sea erases everything it touches. I no longer wear the collar. The church allowed me to fade quietly. No trial, no statement, only a silence that suited us both. I teach scripture to those who still want to believe, though I no longer claim to. Most mornings I walk down to the water before dawn. The tide always sounds like breathing. I stand there and listen until the sun breaks the horizon and the world turns gold for a moment, fragile and merciful. Sometimes, if I close my eyes, I can almost hear her humming again, not from the sea, but from the hollow between one wave and the next. I've learned not to answer. After the convent, I returned once more, years later, to see what remained. The building was gone, reduced to rubble, the stones repurposed for a new church down the valley. But when I stepped into what had been the chapel, I saw a single candle still standing upright on the cracked altar. It was unlit, yet its wick was blackened, as if it had burned through the years without witness. I didn't touch it. Some things, I've learned, don't want to be relit. People sometimes ask why I still keep her rosary bead. I tell them it's a reminder, though I'm not sure of what. Forgiveness, perhaps, or the cost of faith. It rests on my bedside table, and once during a storm, I woke to find it glowing faintly in the dark. For a moment, I thought it pulsed with life. But when I blinked, it was just glass again, cold and dull. I wept anyway. I used to think possession was when something foreign takes hold of you. Now I know it's the opposite. When the part of yourself you've buried decides to breathe again. What haunted that convent wasn't evil. It was memory, asking to be heard. In confession, I tell my students that silence is not the absence of God. It is His last language, the one spoken when words can no longer bear the truth. They nod, though I suspect they don't understand. I hope they never do. There are nights still when I dream of that chapel. The air smells of wax and rain, and Miriam stands beside me, her eyes calm, her lips moving in prayer. Only this time, I'm not the one performing the exorcism. She is. And she whispers the same words I once did, but her voice is soft, almost tender. Leave him. He's learned enough. I always wake before dawn, trembling yet lighter somehow. The sea hums outside my window, low and steady. It feels less like a warning now, More like a heartbeat that's not entirely my own. I used to wonder if the thing in that convent ever followed me home. Now I understand. It never had to. It was already here,